Scopophilia is a popular term used in film and media studies that generally refers to the pleasure derived from looking and involves the act of looking at others in a one-way medium. This idea is adapted by many artists in the 20th century who use it as a framework for their art, exploring themes of looking through a one-sided window as a spectator towards a subject. In more specific contexts, however, scopophilia examines the sexual aspect of the act of looking and the objectification of its looked-at subject. This is a concept most favorably used by directors of horror, such as Alfred Hitchcock, John Carpenter, and most notably one that I will be looking at most in this video, James Whale's 1935 film, Bride of Frankenstein. To properly inspect the scopophilic relations between cinema and its viewer through Bride of Frankenstein, we must first inspect the film through a feminist lens by drawing upon aspects from Laura Mulvey's essay on visual pleasure and narrative cinema, and applying them to the film. In this essay, Mulvey critiques women's place in film as the subject of the gaze of the audience, and her lack of depth of character outside this gaze. She critiques that women's sole existence on screen is to adhere to the male gaze, as she states. In a world ordered by sexual imbalance, pleasure in looking has been split between active male and passive female. The determining male gaze projects its fantasy onto the female figure, which is styled accordingly. In their traditional exhibitionist role, women are simultaneously looked at and displayed, with their appearance coded for strong visual and erotic impact, so that they can be said to connote to-be-looked-atness. Women displayed as sexual object is the leitmotif of erotic spectacle. She holds the look and plays to and signifies male desire. This concept applies to the Bride of Frankenstein very fittingly, as the overarching goal of the film is to fabricate this female subject in the form of a bride for Frankenstein's monster. Dr. Praetorius's motives directly align with that of the male gaze, as his goal is to create an objectified woman void of existence outside of her role as a bride. Furthermore, she is not given a name, just Bride, ultimately rendering her inexistence outside of her role as such. We see this in the costume design of the film, as she remains obscured in bandages and is only revealed until she dons the wedding dress. The non-diegetic score also facilitates this idea, as wedding bells play upon her reveal.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
Another way in which the film communicates the bride's existence in relation to the male gaze is through the mise-en-scène of the scene leading up to her resurrection. The audience may notice the film's use of phallic imagery within the props that Dr. Praetorius and Dr. Frankenstein use, as the electrode array on the resurrection platform is inherently phallic, with the pillar erecting out towards the sky repeatedly. This mise-en-scène coincides with the idea that the bride is the product of scopophilia, as these props, which resemble the phallus that beam with electricity, are what brings her to life, just as she is brought to life with the phallocentric idea of her place as bride and nothing else. The film displays her existence in reliance on phallocentrism in a literal and figurative manner. Another way in which the film communicates the bride's adherence to scopophilia in the male gaze is through blocking, and the character movement on screen after her resurrection. The blocking of the scene consistently places the bride between the two men on screen, communicating the patriarchal setting under which she was born into. We also see the manipulation of her movements by these men, as well as Dr. Frankenstein taking her by the hand as she swoons, in a very choreographed, dance-like motion which further accentuates the idea of her exclusivity as a bride, as she remains so even when fainting. Despite these concepts, we still see the bride's inherent repulsion of these ideas, which place her as the product of male fantasy, or as the subject to be looked at. Within the repulsing scream upon the viewing of her would-be bridegroom, she is rejecting her role given to her as a bride. We also see this upon the audience's first slightly obscured view of her. The reveal of her eyes in this clip expresses her rejection of scopophilia, as this extreme close-up of her gaze is directed immediately at the camera lens, directing the audience's gaze back at them, and ultimately dissolving any cinematic pleasures derived from the one-way medium. In conclusion, Bride of Frankenstein gives film analysts today a useful marker for this pattern of spectacle that we find so often in the horror genre today, through its manipulation of scopophilia in relation to the cinema medium.